former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson. John, welcome. We're going to talk about Australia Day, but I just want to get your reaction again to this whole debate about pill testing, making illegal drugs, criminal gang-produced drugs safer, but not doing anything much to tell young people it's crackers to take them in the first place.
Well, I'm with Nancy Reagan. Just say no. That's the negative. The positive is to say to young people, look, be a hero and grapple with real life, make a difference, stop trying to escape real life because it ends in tragedy.
When I was in the UK for a little bit over the break, I got the sense there that there's some sort of waking up to woke, you know, that they are sort of reaching, or the argument is they're reaching peak woke, and that the real pushback from ordinary people has come about. What's your sense of it?
I've thought a lot about this because you and I were in London at the same time at the ARC conference, and several people made the observation, some of them not Australians, that the first time the general population in a major Western country or a significant Western country in recent times has had to clearly send a message as to how they feel about woke was probably the Voice vote in Australia, and they overwhelmingly rejected it. And so I think there's a powerful argument. If you look at that, you look at what's happening in America now and their leading universities, as Americans realise with horror what cesspits they've become as a result of wokeism. It's an African-American term meaning, amongst other things, that you finally awaken when you understand the great problem with the world is the evil of racism. All whites are racist, but only whites are racist. So it's a divisive sort of concept in itself. And I don't think mainstream people have ever been on side with it. You've now seen that they clearly want something better. The challenge is for our leaders to provide that something better, because we're operating in an environment where so many elites lack the self-reflection and the humility to say, we shouldn't just describe those who disagree with us as deplorables. Many of these woke types who sit around their expensive suburban dinner tables decrying the deplorables and decrying people like Trump fail to understand that one way of looking at the whole Trump thing would be to say, people are saying, it's so sick, the cancer's so bad, we've got to go for really radical therapy, for chemotherapy to try and kill it. And while ever you continue to ignore that voice, you make it worse.
Let's look at the debate about Australia Day, because it's just become a real sore, an open wound, I think, for Australians. And I know people who support Australia Day are just sick of the debate. I think that's where the left profits. They want us to be worn down. They want us to say, look, just make it go away. Okay, I don't agree with you, but let's just stop talking about it. I'll roll over and accept a date change. We know that's not the end of it with the left. There'll be no date that makes Australia and its colonial heritage acceptable. They want us to be forever ashamed of who we are. And putting aside all the debates about, you know, where you can buy the flags and the paraphernalia for the 26th of January, you know, which supermarket stocks it now, isn't this an issue about Australians losing self-confidence?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right to say that you have certain segments of, you know, if you like, an activist class who have plain objectives in mind. It's not just moving Australia Day, it's doing away with Australia Day. It's for Painters a day when we celebrate genocide. I notice Anthony Dillon very thoughtfully has written, he's never met an Australian who celebrates the idea of genocide against Indigenous people. And I think that's an important point. But what we've got here is woke capitalism or corporate wokeism. And this is what I find really worrying. Again, Anthony Dillon has some advice for them. I hope if there are any of them listening, they might read his very thoughtful and intelligent article published today. You know, we need them to take a leadership role. Now, plainly, I mean, they've really fessed up. This is not just about declining sales. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. If they're conscious of the community debate, well, that means they've heard the minority of the activists who are out of step with the bulk of Australians, which means they're out of step with the people who buy the most of their product. And it also means that they've continued in their pride to stubbornly, many of them, not take on board the lessons from the voice. People don't want corporate leaders, big business, telling them what's right and what's wrong socially. Let people decide in the marketplace.
You're right to make that point about the majority supporting Australia Day. I spoke to Daniel Wild from the IPA last night. Their polling found across the board majority support. 4 out of 5 Australians want the date to stay where it is. Only a small percentage, only really under the age of 25, had some support for a move. You've sat around a cabinet table in the Howard era. You've committed troops to war. Troops are under our flag, wearing our uniform. What worries me, when we run our country down as much as we do, when we make patriotism a dirty word, if in our future, when we look to our north with China, if in our future when the worst comes, we're called on to defend our country, who's going to do what your great-grandfather and my great-grandfather, my grandfather did, and wear the uniform, John, should we ever need it?
Well, it's an incredibly important point. I'd make this observation that Victor Davis Hanson in the United States has written very extensively about this from his vast understanding of history. When a people stop believing in the well springs of their own civilization, their military capacity doesn't matter very much. They lose their way. And we need, it's not just Australia, let's be fair about this. It is the West, America, Britain, Canada, much of Europe. They've given up on an understanding of what it is that they have. And boy, will we miss it when we don't have it. And as you mentioned, those who have gone before us, I grew up with a father who'd almost lost his life in the famous Battle of El Alamein, the first turning point of the Second World War. He wasn't expected to live, literally given up for dead. But he was prepared to pay that price. And from the farm that he left, so, by the way, were 3 Aboriginal stockmen that went as well. And tragically, 2 of them didn't come back. My father nearly didn't come back. What were they doing? They were saying our way of life, looking after our vulnerable, we hear a lot of talk about that, those who can't go out and defend themselves against forces of evil who don't believe in freedom, who actually practice genocide, as a case in that war, of course. They've recognised it was worth standing against. Do we have the necessary self-belief? I will say this about under 25s. I meet the cream of them, I think, are really starting to realise what a dud they've been sold and are looking for more substance and answers. I really believe that.
Yeah, you're right. They are
quite optimistic.
You're right. And they do give you hope, some of the ones that I've met with you, that they will stand up against this storm. John Anderson, great to have you back on the program.